Downtown Atlanta, 10:14 a.m. Officer Mark Delaney adjusted his patrol hat and stepped out of his cruiser. A light drizzle dampened the streets as he spotted a woman in a sleek black coat walking briskly through a restricted zone near the courthouse. She wasn't wearing a visible badge, and she wasn't responding to his verbal commands. "Ma'am. This area is restricted. Stop where you are," he barked. The woman paused, turned her head slightly, but kept walking. Frustrated and assuming she was ignoring lawful orders, Delaney moved in fast. "Stop. Right now." Before she could reach the building's side entrance, he grabbed her arm firmly. She resisted instinctively, and within seconds, he had her restrained against the wall. "What do you think you're doing?" she said, calm but commanding. "You're trespassing and resisting," he snapped, pulling out his radio. That's when two suited men stepped out of the side entrance, eyes wide. "Sir. That's Director Evans." Delaney froze. "Director who?" The woman slowly turned around, brushing rain from her face. "Director Maya Evans. Federal Oversight Bureau." Delaney's blood ran cold. His grip loosened. Officer Delaney took a step back, his hand dropping from his radio. The two men in suits, clearly federal agents, rushed over. "Director Evans, are you all right?" one of them asked, casting a sharp glare at Delaney. "I'm fine," Maya replied coolly, brushing off her coat as if nothing had happened. "Just a little misunderstanding." Delaney's face flushed. "Ma'am, I didn't realize, that much is obvious," she interrupted, her voice controlled but cutting. "Do you normally detain people without cause in federal zones? I thought you were trespassing. You didn't identify yourself." "I didn't get the chance," she replied, pulling a sleek black ID wallet from her coat. The seal of the Federal Oversight Bureau gleamed against the leather. "But since you're so quick to act without facts, let me return the favor. What's your badge number?" Delaney stammered. "Ma'am, I didn't mean any harm." Director Evans turned to one of the agents. "Make a note of this officer's name and unit. We'll be reviewing body cam footage." Delaney's heart sank. He had acted out of protocol, again, and this time, not against a civilian, but against someone with the authority to audit his entire department. As Evans walked past him toward the building, she added over her shoulder, "Next time, think before you act. Not everyone without a badge showing is a criminal." Officer Delaney sat in the break room of the precinct later that afternoon, staring blankly into a paper cup of lukewarm coffee. The room buzzed with casual chatter, but it all faded into the background. His mind was stuck on what had happened just hours earlier. He'd manhandled a federal director. And not just any director, Maya Evans, known throughout federal and local enforcement circles as the new head of internal agency reviews. She had the authority to suspend officers, shut down precincts, and overhaul entire departments if she found cause. Captain Reyes entered the room with a clipboard and a grim expression. "Delaney. My office. Now." The hallway to the captain's office had never felt longer. Reyes shut the door behind them and didn't sit. "I just got off the phone with the bureau." Delaney swallowed hard. "Sir, it was an honest mistake. She didn't identify herself." Reyes slammed the clipboard on the desk. "You grabbed a senior federal official. On federal property. Without warning. Do you know what kind of storm you've brought on this department?" Delaney said nothing. "There's going to be an internal investigation," Reyes continued. "Effective immediately, you're suspended from field duty pending review. Hand in your badge and weapon." Delaney's hands trembled as he unclipped his badge and placed it on the desk. He opened his holster slowly and set the pistol beside it. "I didn't mean for this to happen," he said quietly. "Intent doesn't erase impact," Reyes replied. "Especially when the person you put your hands on can erase us from the map." 3 days later. The conference room inside the Federal Oversight Bureau's regional office was cold, not just from the air conditioning, but from the atmosphere itself. Officer Delaney sat at the far end of a long glass table, flanked by two internal affairs representatives from his department. Across from him sat a trio of bureau officials, all dressed in crisp suits. At the head of the table sat Director Maya Evans. She wore the same calm expression as she had during the incident. Composed. Measured. But there was no mistaking the authority in her presence. The kind of authority that silenced rooms. "Let's begin," she said, tapping a finger on the thick folder in front of her, his file. "Officer Mark Delaney," she started. 6 years on the force. Commendations for quick action, but also 2 previous warnings for excessive force in uncertain situations. Delaney shifted uncomfortably in his chair. "You've made assumptions before. You've acted before confirming facts. This time, it just happened to be someone with more power than you expected." "Ma'am," Delaney began, choosing his words carefully, "I understand what I did was wrong. I didn't recognize you, and I was trying to follow what I thought were protocol standards for unknown individuals in a secure zone. There was no intent to harm." "But you did harm," Maya said sharply. "Not physically, though that's arguable, but procedurally, reputationally, and symbolically." She leaned forward slightly. "We can't afford officers who react based on assumption, not training. What if I were someone else in plain clothes that day? Someone less equipped to respond calmly?" The room was silent. "Director," said one of the internal affairs reps, "we're prepared to issue a formal apology on behalf of the department, and Officer Delaney is willing to undergo extended retraining." Evans looked at Delaney directly. "Retraining can work, if someone truly understands why it's necessary." Delaney met her gaze. "I get it now," he said, voice low but steady. "Not just because of what happened to me, but because of what it could have meant to someone else. I let pressure override judgment. That's not what I signed up for." Evans nodded slowly. "That's the first thing you've said today that sounds like growth." She closed the folder. "The review board will issue a final recommendation in 48 hours. Until then, Officer Delaney, you remain suspended without badge or weapon. Dismissed." As he rose and left the room, Delaney felt the weight of his badge still pressing on him, even though it was no longer at his side. That night, Mark Delaney sat alone in his apartment, the only light coming from a muted TV playing the evening news. He wasn't watching it. His eyes were fixed on nothing. His thoughts circled like vultures over everything that had led to this moment. For the first time in years, the badge wasn't on his dresser. The uniform wasn't hanging clean and pressed in the closet. He felt stripped, not just of rank, but of identity. He'd joined the force to serve. To protect. To stand for something honorable. But somewhere along the way, the job had hardened him. Made him quick to act, slow to listen. He called it being alert, but maybe it had been something else, something closer to fear. Or pride. His phone buzzed. It was a text from Officer Simmons, a colleague at the precinct. "Heard you met the Iron Lady in person. You still breathing?" Delaney didn't reply. Instead, he opened his laptop and started replaying the bodycam footage that had been sent to him for review. He watched himself approach Evans. Heard the tone in his own voice, sharp, impatient, commanding. He winced as he saw the moment he grabbed her. There was no aggression on her part. No threat. She'd merely kept walking, calm, composed. And he had responded like she was a danger. As he paused the video on her expression, not fear, but disappointment, something broke open inside him. It wasn't about rank. It wasn't about who she was. It was about who he had become. His mind drifted back to his academy days, when a trainer had once said, "Every citizen is your responsibility. And every action you take reflects the kind of officer you choose to be, not just when it's easy, but especially when it's not." Delaney closed the laptop and stared out the window. He had a decision to make. Not just about his job, but about whether he could still become the kind of man, the kind of officer, he once believed he was meant to be. 2 days later. The halls of the precinct were quieter than usual as Officer Delaney walked through them in plain clothes. No uniform. No weapon. No badge. Just a folder in hand and the weight of the past week pressing against his shoulders. He reached the administrative conference room at 10 a.m. sharp. Inside were familiar faces, Captain Reyes, 2 internal affairs officers, and at the center of the table, once again, Director Maya Evans. "Officer Delaney," Reyes said as he motioned to the open seat, "have a seat. The board is ready to deliver its final recommendation." Delaney sat, steadying his breath. Director Evans folded her hands and spoke first. "In the time since our last meeting, we've reviewed your service history, prior incidents, your body cam footage, and your response to the events. While this wasn't your first infraction involving judgment under pressure, your reaction since has shown something different." She paused, looking directly at him. "You didn't deflect. You didn't justify. You owned it." Delaney nodded once. "Because I had to." Evans continued. "That doesn't undo what happened. But it does open the door for something else, accountability. Growth." One of the internal affairs agents added, "We also received a voluntary statement from Officer Delaney detailing his plans for further training, mentoring younger officers on response ethics, and requesting a reassignment to a community outreach unit." Captain Reyes raised an eyebrow at Delaney. "That wasn't required. Why'd you do that?" Delaney cleared his throat. "Because I need to rebuild trust. Not just with the people out there, but with the badge itself. That starts with serving, not commanding." Evans looked toward the other officials, then back at Delaney. "The board has decided not to terminate your employment," she said. "You'll remain on suspension for 30 days, during which you will complete an intensive review course and psychological evaluation. Upon return, you'll be reassigned to a non-combat unit focused on conflict de-escalation and community engagement." Delaney let out a slow breath. Relief mixed with responsibility. This wasn't freedom. It was a second chance, and one he didn't take lightly. Evans stood up. "Remember, Officer Delaney, this isn't the end of a mistake. It's the beginning of a correction. Whether that becomes redemption, is entirely up to you." Delaney stood, too. "Thank you for the opportunity, Director." She offered a nod, not warm, not cold. Just firm. Honest. And that, somehow, felt better than forgiveness. 6 weeks later, Officer Mark Delaney found himself standing at the entrance of the Community Outreach Center, a bright, open space filled with colorful murals and the buzz of activity. Gone was the hardened, reactive cop he once was, in his place stood a man determined to listen first, act second. His first assignment was a workshop on conflict resolution with local youth, a group skeptical of law enforcement but curious enough to show up. Delaney cleared his throat and began, "I won't pretend I have all the answers. But I want to share what I've learned, and more importantly, hear what you have to say." The room was quiet, then a young woman raised her hand. "Why should we trust cops when they jump to conclusions about us?" she asked. Delaney met her gaze. "Because some of us are trying to change that. I made mistakes, serious ones, and I'm working to fix them. That starts with respect and understanding." Over the weeks, Delaney volunteered in neighborhood meetings, helped mediate disputes, and even organized events to bridge gaps between the community and police. One afternoon, a message came in from Director Maya Evans herself. "Keep going. Accountability is the first step toward trust. I'm watching." It was a reminder that while a single moment could define a day, a lifetime of actions could redefine a person. Mark Delaney smiled, knowing that his true identity now wasn't about rank or uniform, it was about integrity earned through change. Months passed, and the transformation in Officer Delaney's approach became evident, not only to the community but also to his fellow officers. His experiences had reshaped his view of the badge and the responsibility it carried. At a neighborhood gathering one evening, Delaney stood beside Director Maya Evans as they both addressed a crowd of residents, local leaders, and police officers. "Trust doesn't come overnight," Evans said, her voice steady. "But accountability and transparency build the foundation." Delaney added, "I'm here not just as an officer, but as someone who has learned that every person deserves respect before judgment. That's the standard I now live by." A few hands raised for questions. One elder asked, "How do you make sure this change lasts?" Delaney looked around. "By holding ourselves accountable every day. By listening even when it's uncomfortable. And by never forgetting that a badge isn't a shield from mistakes, it's a reminder of our duty to protect and serve all." Evans smiled subtly. "And that is why oversight isn't punishment, it's partnership." The event ended with a sense of cautious hope. Bridges once burned were slowly being rebuilt, not with grand gestures, but through consistent, honest effort. Delaney knew the path ahead was long, but for the first time, it felt like he was walking it in the right direction. Nearly a year had passed since the incident that nearly ended Officer Delaney's career. The precinct had changed, and so had he. No longer the brash cop quick to act without thought, Delaney had become a symbol, one of accountability and growth, in a department striving to regain community trust. His reassignment to the Community Outreach Unit had opened doors he hadn't known existed. He worked closely with schools, churches, and neighborhood groups, helping organize workshops on conflict resolution, bias awareness, and effective communication. He had even begun mentoring rookie officers, emphasizing the importance of patience, respect, and de-escalation. One crisp autumn morning, Delaney was invited to speak at a regional law enforcement conference focused on reform and community engagement. Standing at the podium, he looked out at an audience of officers, policymakers, and community advocates. "Too often, we see our role as enforcers rather than partners," he began. "I made a mistake that could have cost me everything. But it was also a wake-up call. The badge is not a symbol of power over people, but a promise to protect their dignity." He shared the story of his encounter with Director Maya Evans, not to shame himself, but to illustrate the potential for change when officers take responsibility. After his speech, a woman approached him. It was Director Evans. "You've come a long way, Mark," she said with a rare smile. "Your willingness to confront your failures has made a difference, not just for you, but for many." Delaney nodded, feeling a weight lift from his chest. "Keep pushing," she added. "Because real change doesn't end with one person. It spreads." As he walked away from the conference center, Delaney felt a renewed sense of purpose. His past mistakes didn't define him. His actions moving forward would. And that was the legacy he was determined to write. The following months tested Officer Delaney in ways he hadn't anticipated. The community outreach role, though less physically demanding than patrol, challenged him emotionally and mentally. He encountered skepticism, distrust, and sometimes outright hostility, reminders that rebuilding trust was not a quick fix. One afternoon, Delaney was called to mediate a tense situation at a local community center. Two young men, recently involved in a neighborhood dispute, sat facing each other with clenched jaws and folded arms. The room hummed with the watchful eyes of neighbors and family members. Delaney began calmly, "I know things have been rough. But fighting won't solve what's broken. Let's talk." At first, voices rose. Accusations and old grievances surfaced. But Delaney remained steady, guiding the conversation, reminding everyone that each person deserved to be heard without judgment. Hours later, the two men shook hands, tentative but genuine. A small victory, but one that rippled through the neighborhood. Word of Delaney's efforts spread. Parents thanked him for being present, young people saw an officer who listened, not just enforced. His own precinct started to recognize the value of community work, with more officers volunteering for outreach assignments. Yet, Delaney knew redemption was ongoing, not a destination. One evening, as he locked up the center, his phone buzzed with a message from Director Maya Evans. "Your work is a beacon. Keep shining it, Mark." He smiled and typed back, trying to. "One day at a time." As he closed the door, Delaney realized that the true power of his badge was not in authority, but in responsibility, a responsibility he was now proud to carry. Nearly 2 years since that fateful day when Officer Mark Delaney's actions sparked a turning point in his life and career, the man who once reacted hastily had transformed into a leader who inspired change. Delaney now headed the precinct's newly established Community Relations Division, a unit created to foster dialogue, transparency, and mutual respect between law enforcement and the neighborhoods they served. Under his guidance, the division launched several initiatives, youth mentorship programs, public safety workshops, and regular community forums, designed to build bridges where there had been walls. At a City Hall event, Delaney was introduced by the mayor as a testament to growth and the power of accountability. As he stepped to the microphone, he took a moment to look out over the diverse crowd, residents, officials, activists, and fellow officers. "Change isn't easy," he began. "It requires humility, commitment, and the courage to face your mistakes head-on. I stand here not as someone who was perfect, but as someone who chose to learn and grow." He shared stories from his journey, his missteps, his challenges, and the people who had helped him see the path forward. After the speech, Director Maya Evans approached him with a warm smile. "You've made this your mission," she said. "And you're making a real difference." Delaney nodded, the weight of years lifting with every encouraging word. "It's only the beginning." As the crowd applauded, Delaney knew that the badge he wore now symbolized something far greater than authority. It was a promise. A promise to serve with integrity, respect, and unwavering dedication to the community. And with that promise, a new chapter truly began. It was a quiet morning when Officer Delaney received a call that brought his journey full circle. A young woman had been arrested near the courthouse for allegedly ignoring orders to leave a restricted area. The situation echoed his own past incident, and Delaney knew the delicate balance required. He arrived at the station and requested to speak with the woman before any formal processing. Her name was Tasha, a college student passionate about social justice. Nervous but determined, she explained she was part of a peaceful demonstration and believed in standing her ground. Delaney listened carefully, recalling the lessons he'd learned over the years. "Look," he said gently, "I know what it feels like to be misunderstood and judged too quickly. But this job isn't about power, it's about respect and protecting your rights." He advocated for her release without charges and arranged for her to attend a community dialogue forum instead. As they parted, Tasha looked at him thoughtfully. "Thank you. It means a lot that you understood." Delaney smiled. "We're all learning. That's how change happens." Walking away, he felt a quiet pride. His journey, from a reactive officer to a compassionate leader, had not only reshaped his life but was helping to reshape the very fabric of the community he served. The past was no longer a shadow but a foundation upon which he built trust, respect, and hope. Years later, Officer Mark Delaney stood at the podium during the annual Police and Community Partnership Awards. The room was filled with officers, community leaders, and citizens who had witnessed the transformation of a department once fractured by distrust. Delaney spoke with a calm conviction. "When I first joined the force, I thought wearing the badge was about authority. I learned the hard way it's about accountability, to the people, to the truth, and to ourselves." He paused, letting the weight of those words settle. "We've come a long way, but the work never ends. Every encounter is an opportunity to listen, to learn, and to grow. And that begins with admitting when we're wrong." In the audience, Director Maya Evans watched with a proud smile, a silent acknowledgement of the journey they had both been part of. As the applause filled the room, Delaney knew his story was no longer about a single mistake or moment of regret. It was about the power of change, the strength found in humility, and the promise of a better future built on respect and understanding. The badge was no longer just a symbol of his authority. It was a beacon of hope. And that legacy was the greatest victory of all.